There are countless pieces of art. There are so many of them that it is simply impossible to go through them all, to know everything. However, among all this mass, rare are the works which will really mark you, and many masterpieces will pass under your nose. These works, sometimes less popular because of their singularity, are often drowned by many ordinary works. We have to discover them by exploring in depth what the art world has to offer us. And when we finally find one of these rare gems, it is natural to want to share our discovery, to want to make it known to as many people as possible. And that's why I want to make you discover a webtoon that I consider as a masterpiece, and which is unfortunately almost unknown to everyone in France, Hellper. And I reassure you, there will be no spoilers. Hellper is a Korean webcomic, so a manhwa drawn and scripted by Ki Kast. There is currently a season of 188 chapters, with an official English translation on Webtoon and a French fan translation still on Webtoon, but you have to do a little manipulation to find it. In fact, you have to set the language of the site to English and then go and search in the Hellper fan translation to find the French fan translation, since the fan translation are excluded from the official French version of the site. But don't worry, I'll put the link to the first chapter in French in the description, so that it goes faster. There is also a second season of which an English fan translation has just started on MangaDex, and I don't really know where it is in Korea, but there are 3 seasons planned. But I reassure you, the first season is enough by itself and is already a slap in the face, but we'll come back to it. In any case, you can go and read it with the fan translation, it's generally very good. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the guy who took care of the translation, because he really did it for few people. Knowing that the chapters have an average of 10 or 15 likes, that's to say that almost nobody knows the webtoon in France. And it's really a pity because it's a real gem. In short, if you want to be part of the elite, read Hellper. But what is it about? Well, the story is about Gwangnam, the leader of a gang called Kilberos, a strong, tall, charismatic, kind, generous man, a real icon, who is going to die in chapter 1. Yeah, these things happen. But anyway, he was riding his motorcycle without a helmet. He hit a truck and died. So he's going to end up in the afterlife with a black ticket on his wrist, a sign that he's going to be sent to hell by what we call reapers. Except that he will say fuck to the half-drunk reaper who came to get him and will escape. He will meet another ghost like him named Sese, who will teach him that if he gets 100 black tickets by stealing them from other ghosts, his ticket will turn into a white one and he will be able to go to heaven or be reincarnated. His goal will be to be reincarnated as someone close to his girlfriend, so that he can find her and protect her in his next life. Meanwhile, in the world of the living, we will follow another story in parallel. That of his gang Kilberos, which will have to rebuild itself without him, which will inevitably lead to internal conflicts. In short, this is the principle of the story. But apart from that, why is it so great? The very principle of the story is based on a double narration between the real world, to which we, the readers, can identify ourselves, since it is identical to ours, and the world of the afterlife, which is a world of pure fantasy. In this way, the author will be able to make cohabit in the same story 2 usually incompatible genres, the Furio, where we generally follow young thugs beating the crap out of each other for anything and everything in a real street mode, and a shonen-type fantasy based on magical powers and big stylish fights. Normally this mix should be impossible, since the interest of the Furio will be rather to be able to identify with an environment that we know, while the fantasy will have the opposite goal, to make us travel towards a world of which we know nothing and where everything remains to be discovered. But with this double narrative, Hellper manages to create a mixture that is both atypical and very coherent. First of all, the point of view in the afterlife, where we will follow Gwangnam, offers us a universe a little inspired by biblical mythology, but which remains super original. It is a real fantasy universe in the sense that it has its own codes, its own stakes, its own functioning, or to summarize, its own law. And on the other side, in the real world, we face a world that we know well and all its problems, even more in the city of Kana, where the story takes place, which is a city known to be rather dark at the base. Hellper will thus be able to tackle themes and problems very rooted in reality, while perfectly exploiting the advantages of fantasy worlds. Also, the dual narration does not tell 2 different stories in parallel without any link between them. While Gwangnam's adventures in the afterlife will be emphasized more often, The adventures of his comrades on Earth will complement the plot by telling us more about the main character. Moreover, the two stories will even be connected to each other in various ways that I won't spoil for you. One of the other great points of Hellper, in my opinion, are the drawings. Well, technically they are not incredible, at least at the beginning, but the author really has an atypical style and a unique aesthetic. The drawings are mostly in black and white, and in the afterlife, when he uses color, it will always be primary colors that will be mainly to designate the social rank of the people in the afterlife. The ghosts, at the bottom, will have parts in red. Then we go up the colors of the rainbow to find at the top those who wear the color purple. In the real world, the color will be used in a more classic way, even if the black and white will be more dominant. The author's line is very geometric. We'll mostly have simple geometric shapes like circles, triangles, etc. And if it can be a little confusing at the beginning, especially because we really have the impression that it looks very amateurish, the style will become a real strength as the author will really master it better and better. Moreover, beyond the simple drawings, the paneling is also really well thought. The author is really going to play with the codes of Webtoon'S and take advantage of the verticality of its format and of the reading by scrolling to create new stagings which are impossible to transcribe in other media. You will sometimes have a message telling you to scroll super fast, which will almost give you the impression of seeing the action being animated, or will give it a speed effect. In short, this is a webtoon that exploits to the fullest the fact that it is a webtoon. You can feel that it proposes ideas of staging that you can only see by reading webtoon, and that brings a real breath of fresh air for me, who is mostly used to read manga or webtoon inspired, maybe too much by them. Then one of the most essential aspects of Hellper in my eyes is the fights. In the normal world we'll have epic fights, epic 1v1s, where we'll get some big punches in the face, ultra badass scenes, in short, everything that makes a good Furio. But for me the most impressive part will be the fights in the afterlife. As I said before, the afterlife is a real fantasy universe with its own codes and principles. And this also applies to the fighting, since the characters will all be able to have some kind of power by performing what they call transformations with black energy, which will be the equivalent of ki or chakra if you like. I won't go into details but tell you that it's on the level of JoJo's mind blow but keeping the gruffness of Furio. And since an example is worth 1,000 words, tell you that at one point we have a fight over 30 chapters long that opposes a guy who fights with his tongue against a man briquet who fights with the power of cigarettes, and a man rabbit whose power is to control people with an arcade machine. And it's one of the best fights I've ever seen in my life. It's epic, it's got drama, it's got turnarounds, it's got tension, and it's got a crazy staging. In short, this fight should be a fucking classic if it wasn't for the 2/3 guys who read it. The day you do this in animation, it will probably never happen, but imagine, it would be monumental. And I'm telling you honestly, just for that fight, Hellper is worth reading. The characters are for me very clearly one of the big strengths of Hellper. There is for example Seisei, who has one of the saddest flashbacks I know, and who beyond his role of sidekick of the main character, has a real depth, and will even have a rather unexpected but very logical evolution, without spoiling you. We could also talk about the multitude of ultra badass characters like Baekseol, Jilong or Blackbird, or those who at the beginning are just used as a gag but who will in fact have a real development like Yusa. There are also all the members of Kilberos, who each have a different and original story and personality. Take for example Adonis, who is an ultra badass character, but you will never see him in the same way once you know his past. There is also the girlfriend of Gwangnam, the protagonist, who will be at the center of the plot in the end. We can also mention Kraken or Peddler, who are ultra badass and faithful to their principal and to Gwangnam even after his death. And as far as badassery is concerned, don't forget Dog Seller and German either. Anyway, there are many other characters I could talk about, Samsin, Pajuju, the three lower, etc. But the most interesting character is the main character, Gwangnam. He is a very special character because from the beginning of the story he is already perfect in a way. He is very strong, kind, he has a strong mind, he is charismatic, etc. In appearance, he is really perfect, and we see it immediately, whether by seeing his actions in the afterlife, or by seeing the trace he left in the normal world, and the consequences of his absence on all the people around him, for whom he was almost like a prophet. The questions, the stakes of this character will be, what is hidden behind this apparent perfection? Will he remain the same? Will he change the world, or will the world change him? Well, to know all this, you just have to read. Also, one thing to clarify before you start reading, don't expect to read a webtoon full of good moods, with a little touch of drama, but in the end, a lot of positivity, like the classic shonen. Hellper is full of very funny and light moments, moments of pure action, heroism and badassery, but Hellper was also many heavy, dark, very dramatic, very sad, and above all, very raw moments. The The webtoon has a rather realistic way of treating its story and the subjects it deals with, especially in the relationships between the characters. It's quite difficult to explain without spoilers, so I leave you the pleasure to discover all that yourself. But anyway, I love this aspect of Hellper because in the end, it's a very complete webtoon, which can be at the same time very beautiful, very joyful, very positive, with a lot of humor when it's needed, and at the same time horrible, sad and full of negativity. And finally, since I was talking about Hellper as a complete webtoon, it also goes through the themes it addresses. Indeed, the story, which is handled with a masterful hand by the way, and which is punctuated with many foreshadowing, will address many themes. One of the omnipresent themes is that of pop culture and how it is able to change people in a positive way, among other things. There are also all the themes around human relationships: grief, love, friendship, loyalty, jealousy, hatred, deception, etc. We see, for example, the internal conflicts of the Kilberos gang explode once the mourning of Gwangnam is over, revealing the true nature of the people around him, for better or for worse. We can also talk about the eternal question of the innate and the acquired, and the class struggle type questions that follow in the afterlife, especially with the colors I mentioned earlier, which will forever designate the rank of the inhabitants of the afterlife. Will it be possible for those below to escape from their condition despite the innate differences that separate them from those above? We can also note that religion will be a little touched upon, even if in the end it only serves as a support to the storyline, which is in a way a reinterpretation of the Bible. However, it's still interesting to be asked questions like, what would happen if regarding the biblical myth? What if God didn't care about us at all? What if the angels were actually real assholes who abused their authority? Etc. There is also the question of the great savior, the Messiah, the prophet. Can one man alone change men, change the world? And finally, Hellper goes even further by addressing a much more fundamental theme, which will literally be at the heart of the plot, that of the dichotomy of good and evil. Our hero, Gwangnam, seems to be the epitome of goodness and perfection, but he is destined to go to hell. And besides, if among the ghosts destined to go to hell that Gwangnam is going to meet, many seem to have deserved their place there, many others seem on the contrary to deserve anything but that. And globally, all the characters show that they have both good and bad sides, whose proportion varies of course. In this way, Hellper shows us that the very principle of hell and heaven is absurd, that the world is far too complex to be able to put people in the good or the bad box. And he's going to go even further in the rest of the plot, where basically, without spoiling you, there's going to be a concrete decision that is normally a thought experiment, a metaphysical decision, whether evil should become the norm and what that would change. If evil becomes the norm, does evil not become good? Is good considered desirable simply because it is the unconscious norm we have all imposed on ourselves? And finally, since good and evil don't even seem to exist, would it really make a difference if evil became the norm? Wouldn't it just be the victory of one side over the other, with both sides only looking out for their own interests? All of these questions may sound too far-fetched, but since they take place in a world that is based on a reinterpretation of the Bible, they become very concrete once you are immersed in the story. And that's the whole point of stories that take place in worlds different from ours. And Hellper, thanks to the very principle of its story, will succeed in tackling all these themes while remaining very coherent, in order to deliver us a truly complete work. To conclude, I will say that Hellper is a real UFO in the world of webtoons, a rich and complex work with an original story, atypical but perfectly mastered, with drawings that are just as much and with a staging that exploits to the full the possibilities offered by its format, with epic fights and strong and endearing characters. A work filled with moments of joy and happiness as well as dark, dramatic, deep and striking moments. A work unjustly ignored, a rare pearl lost among the ordinary pebbles of the immense beach that is the world of webtoons. A pearl that is now right in front of you and that waits patiently for you to come and admire it.